Examples of use. Okay, so here we're going to see a few scenarios just to make sure we've understood how all of these gateways work. Now, here we have concurrent flows because we already mentioned earlier that a DA gateway is going to allow us to have one inlet and all the outlets are going to have flow. So here I'm using a DA gateway and I'm activating different activities in the process, okay, in parallel. Now, here I have another DA gateway. So as soon as the flow arrives here, these two tasks are activated. Finally, at the end here, I have a CA gateway. What is this CA gateway going to do? It's going to wait for all the threads to arrive in order for the flow to continue. So what am I achieving by putting a CA gateway here? Well, let's imagine I have 3 threads with flow. One over here, and one over here. Let's imagine we directly connect them all to an FN. What would happen then? The first task that would be completed would redirect the flow to the FN, and then these guys here who are still working, they'd lose their task. So they wouldn't be able to interact with it anymore. Obviously, we don't want this to happen in this scenario, so we left a CA gateway in order for this gateway to make sure that the flow is stopped here, and until all of these tasks are performed or finished, the process isn't going to end. It's likely to see a junior consultant create diagrams using more or fewer gateways than what is really necessary. For this reason, in addition to having a very clear idea of the behavior of the gateways, it's essential to understand each scenario and make sure it matches perfectly with the behavior of the diagram of those gateways that we're using. It's usually not necessary to use gateways correlatively, except in some specific cases. So we're going to analyze this scenario. And in this scenario, we've got the following situation. Here, the process is going to start, and here we require 4 signatures. So in this example, we need 4 signatures, or a maximum of 4 signatures. We need one of these 3, or maybe 2 of these 3, or maybe the 3 of them, okay? That's why we have a DO gateway here, because sometimes 1 is going to be activated. Other times, maybe 2 are going to be activated, and in other occasions, maybe 3 are going to be activated, okay? So we only need some of these, or maybe all of them, we don't know, okay? But at the most, we're going to need 4 signatures, because down here, we have these 2 tasks, okay? There's a co-producer and a director of production, and we need at least one of them. So at least one of these 2 have to sign, okay? So let's say in the form, or in this task here, someone says, okay, I need the signature of the camera operator, okay? But by default, the system has to send the flow to these 2 different roles, okay? Because we need at least one of these signatures, okay? So let's say here we mentioned we want the camera operator to sign, okay? So the flow goes to this DA gateway, it would go this way to the DO, and it would activate the camera operator task. Besides, it's always going to go here to the signature of the director of production and the co-producer. And here we have a CX gateway. Why do we have a CX gateway? Because both don't need to sign. As long as one of these sign, that would be enough. Okay, so in the process, we need the signature of at least one of these 2. Okay, as soon as one of them signs, we can actually forget about the other signature. We only need one of them. But we do additionally need the camera operator because that's something that was requested or indicated here in this task. Okay. That would be one example. Let's say there's another example where someone here indicates that they want the signature of the camera operator, the sound engineer, and the set designer. Then we need all of these 3 signatures, and besides, one of these, either this one or this one. It doesn't really matter. But in this scenario, we actually need 4 signatures. And we can see there's 2 gateways over here, and there's 2 gateways over here. Let's see if we can improve this a little bit. Okay, in this scenario, it works perfectly. It's perfectly okay to diagram like this. But we could see another possible scenario would be to use a DO gateway. Instead of using two gateways, we could actually use one, because the DO gateway could perfectly activate these two outlets down here, and besides, one or more of these outlets up here. Okay, so in this scenario, we could use a DA and a DO, or we could just use a DO. If the DO is correctly configured, it could work perfectly. Okay, but in this scenario back here, where we have to bring all these different flows together, we see that we have a CO gateway and a CX gateway. Why do we have a CO gateway? Because here we're going to wait for one or more, okay, depending on how many signatures were requested here. So if they only requested the camera operator, when the flow arrives from the camera operator, the CO, it's an intelligent gateway. It's going to know that it doesn't have to wait for a signature of the sound engineer or of the set designer. Okay, so he's just going to wait for the camera operator. And besides, he's also going to wait for this flow over here because he knows that somewhere here the flow still has to arrive. Now, let's imagine the first scenario in which we only need the camera operator to sign. The flow would arrive here to the CO, and let's say the director of production signs. So the flow would go this way, and immediately the CO would let the flow out because it knows that it cannot receive any other thread with flow. Even though the co-producer still has a task pending, the CX gateway only allows the first one to pass, and the CO is going to know that. So it's not going to wait for the co-producer to sign. All right. So in this scenario, if we analyze it, we could modify this part of the diagram and use only one gateway. But over here, it's going to be impossible to modify the diagram and only use one gateway. So in some scenarios, it is mandatory to use more than one gateway after another one. But there's a lot of other scenarios where we can actually analyze the scenario very well and realize that we only need one gateway in order to cover that scenario. Here we have another scenario, and one thing I want to mention here is that one scenario can have lots of different solutions. So in this scenario, it could seem logical to use a gateway at the end of the process to guarantee that this doesn't end up with uncompleted tasks. So there's a CA gateway, but we can see it's not been properly configured. Why? Here we have a DA gateway. So it's always going to activate these two tasks here. As soon as the flow arrives, these two tasks are going to be activated. Now, once they're activated, the flow is going to go to this gateway, and this gateway is a DX. So it's either going to go this way or it's going to go this way. And this thread here is going to go this way. So the CA gateway, we already mentioned, it's always going to wait for all of the inlets. And in this case, this inlet is always going to arrive. But these two inlets, only one or the other one is going to arrive, because here we have a DX, and a DX gateway only has one valid outlet. Okay, so in this scenario, we can see that this is going to be stuck here forever. We have to change the CA gateway. There's several possible solutions. We could put after this DX and before this the CA, we could put a collector, for example. A collector that brings both threads into the CA. So the CA only has one inlet. It doesn't have, sorry, it would have two. It would have this one up here, and then one that has been previously concentrated with a CL, okay, with a collector. That would be one possible solution. I'm sure you guys can think about some other solution that would also be valid. Sometimes when we diagram, we can have different solutions, different possibilities, and several could be correct. We just have to try to optimize and select the best option. Okay, so here we have our last scenario. And here in this scenario, we're using a lot of gateways. So we're going to explain a little bit how these gateways are being used, okay? First of all, we have a star message event and we have a DA gateway here, okay? The DA gateway is allowing the flow to be split in two, okay? It's going to go this way and it's also going to go this way. And here we can see we have a CA gateway. Okay, let's see what happens up here. Here we have a task. Then there's a DO. The DO is going to send the flow to one or more activities. And here we have a CO. Why do we have a CO? Because we want to wait for one or more flows to arrive. Okay, so we can see this is correct. This is quite common to see after a DA, we can see a CA. After a DO, we're going to see a CO, or after DX, we're going to see a CX. This is quite common. It's not always like that, okay? So here we have a DO that splits the flow into two. Sometimes both are going to have flow, sometimes only one. Okay, so this is a smart gateway. It knows how many flows have to arrive, and it's going to wait for one or more in order to allow the flow to continue. Here we have a DX gateway. It's either going to allow the flow to continue or it's going to allow it to go back. So this loop can go on, or it's just going to end the process. Okay, so let's say it does allow the flow to continue through the yes outlet, and then the flow arrives to the CA gateway. So here we can see this is concentrating this thread and this other thread. Okay, so this is also, we can see it's the same scenario. We have a DA here, and down here we have a CA. Okay, the same as here we have a DO, and over here we have a CO. Then here again we decide to split the flow into three again. The DA is always going to activate all these activities, all these outlets. And here we have a CX, okay? So here, let's say the rule is not applied, as in this. We have a DA, a CA, a DO, a CO. But here we have a DA, and at the end we have a CX. Why do we have a CX? Because the DA splits the thread into all these activities, but here we just want to wait for one of these activities to happen. So as long as one of them happens, the first one that happens is going to allow the flow to continue. Finally, here we have a task. The employee performs their task and the process is finished. So here we can see an example of a process with lots of different gateways and how each of them is working. Thank you for your attention.